Hello, folks. Welcome to a special edition YouTube Live for Sox Machine on the Foul Territory Network. I am Josh Nelson as we have breaking news this Saturday night. The Chicago White Sox, first reported by Jeff Bassett of ESPN, later confirmed by Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan, have acquired right-handed starting pitcher Luis Castillo in a trade with the Seattle Mariners. The White Sox are sending reliever Sir Anthony Dominguez, outfielder Nolan Jones, and catcher Boston Smith in return for the trade. And joining me on this special edition YouTube Live, which we haven't done in a while, gents, it's Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And we got breaking news, Jim, and you have a very interesting perspective because with you being in Nashville, you were watching Charlotte and Nashville reporting on that game for us. And you got a chance to experience Hug Watch, but from a minor league perspective.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you see it unfold in front of you. But it was weird because with these 6 game series, I have to remember what game was which. Eric Haas's debut, uh, he left the game in the 8th inning after grounding out. And there was an awkward pause where Jonathan Cannon had nobody to warm up to as he came out to the mound. Chad Pinder, the manager, is in the dugout trying to figure out who's supposed to come in. He calls in Corey Lee from the bullpen to catch the inning. And so I text James, like, Eric Haas just left the game. Not sure if this is anything. And it turns out that he had dehydration. I talked to Haas the next day. He said that he was grounded out to third, then came back to dugout, had to barf a few times. Must have been something he ate. And he was back in the lineup the next day. So watching tonight and seeing in the middle of the inning, Chad Pinder come jogging to the umpire to inform him about a change. And I'm looking and I'm seeing, like, well, Ryan Glaney's in the box. He's not moving. I look to Riku Nishida at first base. He's got his arm around Angel Rosario, the first base coach, and also the Nashville first baseman, I think is Brock Wilken. He's just like standing on first base with his arms around both shoulders. And so I'm looking at him thinking, oh, is Riku dealt? Is he on the move? Is he coming up? As Pinder is going with his lineup card talking to the umpire. And then Pinder returns to the third base box and nobody moves. But then I see Corey Lee once again come back to the on deck circle. And so I see, okay, that was Nolan Jones's spot. And so I text James, said, like, oh, Nolan Jones just had a game stopping departure, I think, maybe. And didn't really see any activity yet. And so he said, like, is this, should we text Giannis about it? Like, well, then I saw Jairo Iriarte shake hands with Pinder as he was leaving the club. I was like, wait, is Iriarte going? Is he just done for the day? Because sometimes when pitchers are done for the day, they just go to the clubhouse. But the handshake was weird. So I'm like on high alert trying to figure out who's moving. And then I see Jones come, actual hug watch, hugging people in the dugout. And then he goes across as he's going to the tunnel, which is on the third base side, giving a couple hugs on the Nashville side, like, oh, okay, that's something big. And I would not expect Nolan Jones, who is acquired for international money, to be the person who would tip me off to something happening, because I didn't really factor him into any moves. But yeah, sure enough, James starts checking into it and then passing breaks it, and that's how it all played out tonight.
And James, you just recently wrote the recap, which if you are just finding out now, White Sox fans, you can read as far as that trade recap on soxmachine.com. So, James, you wrote in the recap, and as far as your sources within the White Sox with this trade for Luis Castillo are trying to thread the needle. Can you explain from a White Sox rationale why it's Luis Castillo that they targeted to add to their starting rotation?
All right. I wasn't sure if I was muted. Because he's controllable. He's signed through the end of next year. There's a vesting option in his contract for 2028. I think if he pitches 180 innings. So he's still throwing hard. He is 33, but in the idea, like, this is a multi-year solution to your rotation. Just last year, he threw 180 innings of mid 3 ERA ball. For me, he's his fastballs are getting hit a little bit, but also his slider is just defined it decline in whiff rate. There's multiple things that you're like, all right, what's their plan for kind of arresting the guy who's in his career worst season right now, but clearly still talented in some way. For me, the biggest thing jumps out as like this guy once had like one of the most like devastating changeups in the game, and has gone to Seattle. And it's become slowly like this more and more like distant fourth pitch in his arsenal. Not saying necessarily like Castillo fits the mold of like give a supinator a kick change or an alternative changeup in some way necessarily, but like clearly to believe this guy's like a multi-year solution in your rotation, you have to think like there's some method of restoring like his changeup to be like what it was. At the very least, like getting a slider like back to like being a 30% like miss rate pitch, where it's in the 20s now. Yeah, that has to happen too. But like if you're really believing this and putting resources to this, I would think you have a plan for fixing the changeup in some way. That said, like as far as threading the needle, Dominguez, like I certainly thought he looked better. I like certainly his outing in Saturday in Tampa was like the best he's done. Probably in his whole stretch. Like his statistically been better the last 10 outings, but like that was the first one where he looked kind of authoritative through the inning rather than like kind of getting through it or showing you flashes or something. But obviously he'd fallen out of your leverage mix. He's part of like the salary cost probably be more palatable to Sox. Like they are taking on money with Castillo making 22.75 million. Whatever the prorated amount for the rest of this year and next is. But Sir Anthony, you are getting like the 10 million is owed next year off the books, and whatever the rest of this season is. So that's definitely part of it. Boston Smith, it's almost feels like there's a little bit of sense of like found money, and not necessarily that makes him like less valuable or anything like that. But he was someone who wasn't necessarily like, all right, when we were thinking about what the White Sox core is or who the future thing is, certain positions are, we were probably just getting our heads around like where Boston Smith would fit into that. It's more of the idea of like, this is a good bat who's coming through the system. He could help in some ways. And even just, it's funny because Paul Giannis was doing a availability today pregame, it was mostly about draft assignments, but I asked about Boston Smith, like, do you get to this point where he's a little bit raw in terms of catching reps, but he's now already bashed his way to AA and he's this older prospect. You just, he kind of differentiated a lot from what my comp, which was called Prosec, of like this guy who's a catching prospect, could stick behind the plate, but his bat's probably going to excel him across, much faster. Is Smith kind of similar? And he said like it's different in a lot of ways, but he also said like ultimately I think like Smith can be a good left fielder, and the fact that he's catching is going to be part of his versatility, which is like a different profile. And like this guy's for sure on the plate, and like he's possibly going to hit 30 minor league home runs in his first pro season. If that's a full-time catching prospect, like that's a different like kind of value add. So if you view this guy as like kind of a interesting, bat with some versatility, but not necessarily your blank guy of the future at some premium position, and then you have Nolan Jones, who they acquired, in a cash deal earlier in the year, who's kind of minor league depth, especially left-handed. That's not something they have immediate need for. They were like, we didn't trade Caleb Bonham, we didn't trade like some big feat piece of the future core, and we have someone who is going to start for multiple years, proven playoff starter and what that. There's just the whole thing of like, you got to get Luis Castillo to no longer pitch like he's having the worst year of his career. Just the small detail of that, and then it becomes a pretty good value add.
Yeah, we did get this comment from Benjamin. I'm really hoping they see something to fix in Luis this year, because he's been dreadful. Signed a Luis Castillo fantasy baseball owner. Best of luck, Benjamin. I think from a White Sox perspective, I think we're all hoping, Jim, that the White Sox can find something, or maybe just joining this White Sox clubhouse, because this is something that we spoke about in our previous episode that we just recorded yesterday when I was pitching you trade ideas, Jim. Like, if you bring in a Robbie Ray coming in from the San Francisco Giants, does that give him a bump in performance? If you went after and got someone like Reed Detmers, who's been pitching really well, and now Detmers is not on an Angels team that's struggling, could that give him a boost in production? Could Luis Castillo, proven veteran starting pitcher that has started postseason games, could he find a second wind with the White Sox?
Yeah, it's the non-rental angle of this. Ray being a rental, Ray going, theoretically back on the market after a boost. That's one thing for Castillo. I mean, there could be a boost here because, with his struggles with Seattle having a crowded rotation, they've tried some alternate arrangements with him, piggybacking and he hasn't been happy with it. Like it seems like he's used to being a workhorse, as the modern day workhorses go. And it seemed like, I guess, his underperformance begot just dissatisfaction, and he needed more runway or perhaps more room than the Mariners are willing to give him. So, like, that's a case where there is a bounce back potential here. It's just the risk of, talking about Robbie Ray and saying, well, the road splits are kind of scary. And if he
Yeah.
comes to Chicago and it's not good, then you're maybe missing out on an upgrade. But then again, you're paying a rental price and he's out at the end of the year if he's a bad fit or it just doesn't quite work in Chicago as opposed to Oracle Park. And you can move on. And at least for the season, for the remaining 2 months, you signaled to your clubhouse and your fan base that you try to do something with the resources you had. And so I think with Castillo, if you're a rental and they paid, more of a rental price, I think this is high for a rental. Then you would say kind of the same thing of just, well, it's not so long ago that he was a very valuable starter, and it could be one tweak, and it could be just a change of scenery that helps. It's just that if it doesn't work out, then you have a big contract on the books for next year, and you better hope that Chris Getz or Jerry Reinsdorf, Brooks Boyer, they have some revenue ideas in mind to be able to spend past it if it is like acquiring an Andrew Benintendi for the rotation, the way that like the White Sox struggled to spend around the Andrew Benintendi inefficiency.
Here's a great revenue idea. Sign Mutaka Murakami to a contract extension. Get that sweet, sweet money from Japanese sponsors, and that can maybe pay for Luis Castillo. I'm joking, but I'm also not joking. I think we would all love to see a Murakami contract extension. But let's take a look as far as in this contract again for Castillo. And yeah, you do need him to pick it up, Jim, because there could be the risk of like a James Shields type of albatross contract in which the best outcome that you can get if he doesn't pick up his play is, well, we're comfortable having him pitch 5 innings every fifth day. We're confident that he'll give us 150 innings, where there's a lot of questions right now in the back end of the rotation. But I think what you're really hoping for with Castillo is that he does bounce back. And because of his postseason experience, Jim, that you would like him to maybe be part of the equation if the White Sox can outlast Cleveland and Minnesota, that maybe Luis Castillo can start a postseason game. I'm assuming that is the line of thinking here for the White Sox and acquire Castillo. As far as like best outcome for this season is that he does bounce back, and we're perfectly fine sliding him behind Sean Burke and Davis Martin.
When you mentioned postseason, though, looking through some quick Castillo research, trying to figure out exactly what his present state was,
Oh no,
it
is
seemed
it
like some
bad?
of I mean, like it wasn't bad necessarily. There was one bad start. Like his last start was bad,
Uh,
game 4 of the ALCS, but like ALDS was a little bit wobbly. He walked 4 and 2/3 scoreless innings. Like he wasn't quite. He did pick up a win out of the bullpen in Game 5, the 14th inning. So like he did do that, so that's useful. But just like the last start, I think reading through it was kind of the start of the worries about Castillo, and so yeah, you have it both ways. Like he's had good starts in the postseason. It is just one outing. It just happened to hit my ear funny in terms of having just read about it was yeah. It all started last October, and who knows if that was actually true, but it's been or how much that factored in. But it is a case where I'm looking at a Mariners a fan in the comments right now saying that Castillo's been tough to watch, and just like if a Mariners fan and trying to picture it from a third party, how would a Mariners fan or media receive this trade? I'm thinking, well, if they've watched him pitch poorly all year and he did have that clunker, like they might be laughing at anybody in Chicago trying to talk themselves into veteran presence, a stabilizing presence. So yeah, he is a little bit of a mystery here, and just in terms of how sticky the struggles are and whether he can rebound in time to provide value for the rest of the season, for October potentially, and then for next season since he is under contract.
and in our previous episode, when I was pitching trade ideas, James, I was trying to come up with a way that the White Sox could acquire Reed Detmers, but I don't think that's going to be part of the case now. And involving that was my idea of Billy Carlson and Hagen Smith. But it seems like the White Sox front office, let's just start from this perspective. They are trying to protect and not move any of their top prospects, right? Like any one of their top five, they're trying to hold on to. Is that fair to say?
Sure. I guess that would fit the definition of what they put out there of just like, oh, we're trying to prioritize our future. We're trying to,
Right.
keep this sustainable. We're trying to not let the immediate needs of the team like overshadow like what we're trying to build in terms of priority. I mean, there's an argument that like they can't trade three of their five top prospects because like that's not allowed until after the World Series, and then the other one is Caleb Bonnemer, and then you could say like, our fifth is Brady Montgomery, and he's already up. Like so, like that's yeah, it's pretty true, and just in terms of like not Bonnemer, but certainly what they've been signaling is trying to one either not sacrifice the future for kind of today or short term things, or two like what they're basically hoping this trade pulls off is doing both where you're all right, this team is good right now and thus you assume they're going to be good next year, and you're adding a piece that kind of contributes to that and maybe even the year after, and not taking away from like what you had yet to view or started to view as like this is the way. I don't think Boston Smith has hit extraordinarily well this year, like an incredible increase in value from the start of the season. You probably haven't thought to like, well, this is who plays first base if Murakami leaves in free agency, and maybe like someone like Bonnemer or just other offensive options. I don't know. Maybe have taken a more realistic place in that your future considerations than Smith has achieved just at this point.
Now, we did get a question in the comments section, which thank you to everyone. If you're listening to the recording of this was our first chance to go live under the Foul Territory Network. So I'm so grateful for everybody to jump in and watch as far as the live stream. Let me bring up as far as this question here. And this question comes from Justin, and Justin is asking, what is the chance the White Sox swing a move for a higher upside rental starter as well? I like the potential upside, playoff experience, and ability to eat innings, but who throws in a short series? So that's 2-1. James, let's try to address question number one. It's Jose Urquidy and Eric Haas. We talked about that. Very minor moves. But now with Luis Castillo, is this it for the White Sox, or could they possibly pull off another move?
I mean, they still want a catcher. I think that's still a pressing issue. Kyle Teal is still taking defensive drills with his walking boot on, which he says is very helpful because it stabilizes his ankle and keeps him from pivoting in the way that you'd worry about given his sprain. But reflects that he's not necessarily close. And Edgar Carroll's looked better of recent. Drew Romo had a hit the other night. They have said that they want to get a catcher, and even like Noah Schultz having a good start, and Eric Fetty and Noah Schultz having good starts here in Tampa clearly didn't sway them away from doing this. So I don't think they've been swayed out of what they're trying to add to their catching depth. Certainly kind of a more credible kind of guy to throw out there on a regular basis till Teal comes back. Until then, they would still like to add relief help to some degree. Like even if they're making this move, they're not calling up Hagen Smith and Terry McDougal, from what I've been told. So clearly, they don't view that as quite ready or like a sure thing yet at this point. So fair to say, maybe less of a priority now that you've put these resources, or maybe more of a priority now that you've traded Sir Anthony Dominguez, a guy who may be fallen out of your trust, but certainly someone who threw hard and had postseason experience. These are still elements. Starting pitching was far and away like the most pressing need, and something that you couldn't really wrap your mind into saying like they had an acceptable alternative that they consider to a house the way you can with the bullpen. Probably less so with catcher. Even if Caro and Romo have had decent starts this one series that I'm currently at.
I appreciate the Seattle Mariner fans being in the chat as well. We greatly appreciate your guys' perspective because obviously you've seen a lot more Luis Castillo than we have. This is from Nicholas. Castillo be great with the White Sox, young starting pitchers. And again, this is just not for 2026. This is also for 2027 and that vesting option in 2028. So as far as future roster construction for the Chicago White Sox, It's Sean Burke, Davis Martin, Luis Castillo. The White Sox still have another year of Anthony Kay. This does give the White Sox some buffer as well, Jim, if they cannot figure out what to do with Hagen Smith or if Tanner McDougal is better suited in the bullpen. Noah Schultz looked really strong as well. So we mentioned it in our last podcast, the White Sox are one starting pitcher injury away from just absolute chaos and some real trouble. And with adding Luis Castillo, not only for this year, but for future seasons, they've given themselves some depth.
Yeah, and looking at the free agents for next year, a lot of familiar names. Like there's in terms of where the White Sox would be shopping, and if you think of this with them trading Dominguez, what's it like a 1 year, $15 million deal when doing the math for subtracting Dominguez's salary from what's owed to Castillo. If you're looking for a pitcher on that kind of contract, they're all roughly comparable. Like maybe like Shane Bieber would be somebody the White Sox could go after if they were interested in that. But it's all we've seen the White Sox have to shop on this tier before. So yeah, they are investing a certain amount for some stability, some veteran presence, somebody that's I think if it all works out well enough to where he's at least serviceable, somebody the White Sox don't have to necessarily baby or have to figure out like an opener for or have to lift after 5 innings and 80 pitches. They would like him to offer a bit more, but yeah, it's you would like it to be a little bit less of a project, I think, to be somebody who stabilizes. Like there is a possibility that he is that guy that he crosses one thing off the list for next year, and the White Sox can go about marshaling their resources for greater positions of need or at least one bigger upside swing. But yeah, just some question marks are there that he has to answer first.
So we did get this question in the comments section about Sir Anthony Dominguez and him being involved in this deal. And that comes from I Belong to Halo. I'm a little surprised that the White Sox traded away Dominguez. I thought relief pitching was also a need for them. Trading away relief that's been in the major leagues already. And Dominguez, James, as you've been pointing out recently, has been throwing better for the White Sox out of the bullpen. James, are you surprised that the White Sox traded Sir Anthony Dominguez away?
I mean, I didn't think they necessarily were going to purge him at any moment, sort of thing. But in terms of reacting to this, it makes sense. For one, it's such a big part of the salary being a bit they're taking on salary, which is still new and novel for the White Sox, but it's not just adding $22 million to the payroll whole cloth. So them doing this makes sense in terms of that Sir Anthony had been trending up rather than it's just a purely dump. Is you always kind of figure it out well, how are they kind of, if they're seeing the Mariners put starters on the market and thinking would the Sox be a mix of it, the way trying to figure out well, how would they line up is how do they give something that technically helps them in the now? How do two win now teams kind of trade with each other like this in terms of major league pieces? It would be someone who kind of had fallen out of the mix in some way like this, who's still looks viable, still looks still definitely has the stuff of a high leverage guy on a contender, but clearly is going to have a difficult path to returning to what the White Sox originally intended him for, to be the guy who stabilizes the bullpen, not just a member of the mix per se. And as much as he looked good on Saturday and has put together good results out of his last 10 games, we just watched this Yankees series where they basically went to anyone but him in extreme circumstances. Chris Murphy worked 5 appearances in 7 days before Sir Anthony walked out of that bullpen. They got through the game on Wednesday with Grant Taylor getting 7 outs for the first time all season. You had Jordan Hicks, I think that was 3 out of 4 when he came out. There was at least back-to-back days, or wound up being back-to-back days with Brian Hudson. They were not turning to him very willingly. He was only starting to maybe work his way back. And I think you could see him pitch on Saturday and be that's Sir Anthony Dominguez. Yes, we know that command comes and goes, but that looks like the same stuff, same healthy guy he can help our Mariners bullpen, but he's obviously not coming on to be the closer there. He's someone who's kind of offsetting salary, and I think it's a different context. So it's not shocking in terms of like if they traded Grant Taylor for Luis Castillo, I'd be like still wrapping my head around it. So even though I didn't like have some hint on the way he was walking out of the park today that this is what's going down, I think it makes it's much easier to wrap your head around than almost anyone else on the roster as far as like other than like the idea that they could replace Benintendi if they dump someone's salary like that. Like someone who is like paid above, like they're contributing, they're a part of the team, but they're probably paid above what like the centrality of their role is right now. And I think Dominguez fits that bill.
Jim, getting a chance to watch Charlotte, is either Hagen Smith or Tanner McDougal, are they ready to go to join the White Sox bullpen to replace Sir Anthony Dominguez?
Well, they both pitched today. McDougal pitched after Jones left the game, so he's not going to be coming immediately if you're asking along those lines. But yeah, Smith, I think, is close. Like he's looked really good this series. He had the rough outing, his first one back from the IL, but since he's been nails throwing strikes, Cutter looks really good. If they were to call him up first of those two, I wouldn't be surprised. McDougal, his stuff looks good as well. It just the control is a little looser, especially at the slider. When the slider is close, it gets some ugly swings, but there are a lot of there have been some non-competitive ones, some quick walks that he's able to pitch around. Like he's talented enough to do it. But if you're looking for somebody to have more polish, it looks like Smith is leading in that a little bit. Both are going through the paces though in terms of different assignments. Like Smith just came in the middle of an inning for the first time, faced one batter, got him out. He was done for the day, which made me think like, oh, maybe Smith's coming up if they just limited him to one inning after this trade's going, or one batter after this trade's going down. But I think it's more just trying to pitch on back-to-back days, pitch in the middle of an inning, have fresh innings, work some high leverage. Like I think there's a checklist we saw with Grant Taylor last year where they wanted him to do a whole bunch of things that relievers have to do to see how he responded afterwards. And I think it was like 9 appearances or something like that. He checked off all the boxes. He was in Chicago. He hasn't been back. So I think they're kind of doing the same thing right now with Smith and McDougal. But I think of those two, Smith looks a lot closer to having his major league pitch mix all under control.
So Castillo last pitched on Tuesday. It is his spot in the rotation on Sunday. James, they're not disrupting Anthony K. It's still Anthony K tomorrow at 12:40 for I have to imagine with the travel and everything, Castillo would not be able to pitch, but there could be a real chance that we see Luis Castillo make his first start with the White Sox in Boston against the Red Sox.
I would imagine. It has not been clarified. I haven't been able to clarify like who's getting bumped or shifted out of the rotation just yet.
It's a bit soon. I understand that.
Told they're still working through it. And like we're still trying to figure out like when Castillo's like going to talk to media and all that. But yeah, you would think that you're trying to throw him into the fire right away.
That's a tough test.
I mean, Boston's not like killing the ball; they're more just like pitching out of their minds. It's more just like it's the road, it's a tough environment, it's another playoff game, it's a hot team, and you wonder like especially if he's going to a new org and you're kind of like maybe any org when they acquire any arm has some tweak in mind. Does it take a day or two, or not day or two, start or two, week or two, maybe a month to start seeing the best version of him versus obviously I work in the news business for a bit now. He's going to be judged pretty sharply based off the first impression, I would assume. So could get interesting in that aspect. You'd have to think like, yeah, this is what he's here for, is to provide innings. The bullpen has been taxed, even like good starts from Eric Fedde and Noah Schultz this weekend in Tampa, both saw them get pulled at 5 innings without like really much consideration of going past that. Like Schultz pitch count wise can kind of kept going. Fedde like had just crossed the first hitter the third time through the order, which they basically just not let him do. And like they've been really like, I think they win the last 5 Fedde starts. Like they have a plan that they execute with him in that they've been really good at. It's just it's a resource laden plan, and either you can't kind of both have that and Schultz like having outings where he goes threes in the third and it's like super sustainable. And so I think they're trying to address that. But obviously, if Luis Castillo comes in and he's ineffective, it's hard to get through 6 innings being ineffective. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting needle they're going to be threading or trying to thread.
All right. So the White Sox have Luis Castillo. That's one item off the shopping list. Jim, I guess the next position that we should be looking at is catcher. Is that right, James? Or could are the White Sox still part of the starting pitching market, trying to add another starter before the deadline?
I'd be surprised. I mean,
I would be surprised too after this move.
I mean, like I think like scouts have said like rental prices could be reasonable. I just think like if you're really trying, from what like everyone talking about like what an extreme sellers market's going to be, how difficult it's been, how few sellers there are, and like the fact that like two of the sellers are in the AL Central, like you're not going to get the Luis Castillo equivalent from like the Tigers or Royals necessarily. I mean, certainly not the Royals who seem reticent to trade Lugo and Waka at all. It seemed like it's asking a lot for them to get two starters out of this situation. Um, that said, they obviously didn't like fence like amazing essential assets from this. I think if you're viewing it as like they're not trying to trade their top 10 prospects, I think they accomplished that that end.
Yes.
It's just that we're seeing that in terms of like a little bit of the risks they're taking on. But this really fits the bill of what they said they're looking for. You would think that like anything more of this would be smaller in scale, even if there was another like depth or multi-inning option that they had.
Jim, are you planning to be watching Charlotte and Nashville tomorrow for possible more hug watch?
Sure. It is a night game. Like Nashville doesn't have getaway days. They play all their games at night, I think, to
Okay.
maximize attendance. I wonder if that irks visiting teams when they have to leave, get on the bus at 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Sunday night to head home. But yeah, I'd wonder if anything would happen before. But yeah, I will be watching. I will make sure I'm when I'm not shooting photos that I'm on the side where I can look into the Charlotte dugout to see what's happening. Because this time I had to kind of scramble over the other side to get a look in terms of who's leaving, who's hugging, etc. But it is fun. Uh, I will say that we gotten some comments about Boston Smith in the chat about like his numbers, and I will miss him in the system just because he is it's just fascinating in terms of the story, in terms of the production, kind of out of nowhere. And the thing that jumps out to me is, yeah, I talked to him a couple of times. Very pleasant guy to talk to, and gives good answers in terms of how he approaches it, his game, etc. But when I saw his power numbers and he has 22 homers and 7 doubles this year, and he's a catcher, I thought like, he's got to be slow. He's got to be a plotter who just swings for fences, and he's actually kind of fast, at least for a catcher. Like he's got decent speed, and it turns out that his swing, and he talked about it, is just like perfectly angled, basically, to generate these balls that float over the right field fence. And he's not really somebody who has these like line drives that split the gap or anything like that. He says when he hits doubles, it's more miss hits, like off the end of the bat, kind of hooks them down the right field line into the corner. And that's why he has 3 triples to 7 doubles, because that's the way that extra base contact goes. So it's a really fascinating profile, especially at the catching, which, I talked to some people about, around White Sox affiliates that he's with. And they felt like it's possible. He's just raw because he barely played at the right states. He was athletic enough to play other positions when there were other catchers who could only catch, and so he's asked to play a lot, including shortstop at one time. So they said, yeah, he's got some potential. He made strides in terms of his receiving numbers over the course of his time with the White Sox, but he's also not playing all that much behind the plate, and he wasn't sharing time with catching prospects. That made me think like, well, if he was really a catching prospect, they'd be catching more than half the time.
Right.
So it made me wonder, like, do they want other guys behind the plate because his game calling kind of affects pitching prospects, and they want to make sure that they kind of split everybody starts with more experienced catchers versus somebody who is coming along. The game calling was a work in progress. So, when it comes to like judging his damage, it's a very specific, peculiar kind of damage that I wanted to continue seeing just to see how it played out because you don't see this profile very often. And then with the catching, like, well, is he a catcher? Because they're kind of saying one thing, but they're kind of playing him in another way. And I think Janish's quotes today kind of tilted more towards like he's somebody who can catch, which is nice, but maybe not somebody we want to dedicate a pitching staff to. That made me think like, oh, he's not really. If he were more of a catcher of a future or a catcher of a future, a catcher in a mix, I don't know if he'd be thrown in for this kind of deal.
He made him
And then
sound like power hitting, like instead of like he made him sound like Cooper Ingle. But I thought if I hijacked the scrum he was in to make a cross organization comp, that the other beat writers would never forgive me. But like in terms of like Ingle's like hit tool oriented and like Smith is extreme power oriented. So like, but this kind of like, oh, he could catch, but he's probably in terms of like if he cracks a roster, he's the majority of his at bats are coming via left field. Or if he's really hitting, like it's not because he's like taking your full time catcher reps. He's if he bashes his way into your lineup, he's a regular in left field rather than like he's your everyday catcher necessarily. At least for a while. Like I don't know if there's many examples of like this type of like I'm thinking of Kyle Schwarber as like someone like, oh, he's a catching prospect, but he clearly just hit his way up here. Are there great examples of guys like that who have then slowly on the major league level played catcher enough that they became a full time catcher? I could think of someone, but recent examples aren't easily coming to mind.
well, we'll see how it works out from Seattle's perspective. Of course, we'll hear more as far as how Luis Castillo fits into the starting rotation. Again, this is our live reaction. We really appreciate everybody watching our first YouTube live episode since joining the Foul Territory Network. And before we sign off here, I thought this is an interesting question because now, again, the deadline is Monday, August 3rd at 5 p.m. Central Time. Foul Territory will be live from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Ken Rosenthal, AJ Brzezinski, Eric Kratz, Scott Braun will be covering as far as all the latest. So if you're looking for something to watch for those 5 hours leading up to the deadline, go to youtube.com, search Foul Territory. You can watch that live stream. But before we sign off on this live stream, we did get this question from Aurelio. And Aurelio is asking, do you think the White Sox would trade another bullpen arm or two with Hagen Smith, Tanner McDougal, and Drew Thorpe possibly being up soon? James, do you think the White Sox could leverage even more of their current relievers in upcoming deals before Monday's deadline?
Huh. I mean, I don't know if like someone else who kind of quite occupies the space that like Dominguez does. You can make an argument for Hicks, but you are trying to win, and your bullpen's not thin but not deep beyond what you've already done to it. I think that maybe probably being a step too far in
Okay.
terms of taking away from your immediate depth in a big way. Like maybe if someone was like really enraptured by like Trevor Richards in a way, but I think he's already probably overperforming what value you've extended to him as is, and something that he's been talked about a lot is like how available it is. So I think in terms of like innings coverage, maybe he's not like the top three guys you think of like let's handle a high leverage situation, but I think he'd be kneecapping Will Venable a bit more than that it even initially appears. Not you've already taken away Sir Anthony. I think you've already kind of made it like Smith and McDougal really need to become pieces here, or somebody else. I'll never get off the Zach Franklin train all the way, but like I think you're already having picked away like this is what I'm saying is like you already need someone up from AAA to kind of come up and be reliable in some way. Maybe it's not Bobby Jenks and the closer as you're winning the World Series, but like someone else who can figure into this mix in some way. I think you already need that now to happen more than you did while I was enjoying my sandwich in my hotel room 2 hours ago and thinking about
The
what a nice
joys of
relaxing
covering
I've had.
baseball, especially at the trade deadline. Well, we'll see what the White Sox do next. And if they do make any other trades, again, you could be able to read that work on soxmachine.com. Follow us on social media. James is still in Tampa. He'll be covering the series finale between the White Sox and Rays for us. Again, that's first pitches at 12:40 p.m. Central Time. Follow us on all the social media platforms at Sox Machine. Follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And for all those that are watching the YouTube live, as far as this live stream, hit the subscribe button. We'll have future videos and more breakdowns as far as what this Luis Castillo trade means, recapping the Rays series in our upcoming podcast episode. And if the White Sox make any other trades, especially on Sunday and Monday, we'll fire up the live stream machine once again. It'll be Jim and I, as James will be on another live stream on Monday. But we'll have more coverage up to the deadline, and we'll break it when the White Sox make any other moves. But alongside James Fegan and Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thank you so much for watching the special edition Sox Machine live episode as the Chicago White Sox have made the trade with the Seattle Mariners to acquire right-handed starting pitcher Luis Castillo.